Welcome back to another episode of Sun Scrap Nation's podcast. Your host is always Daniel Jonas, back here with a special interview with my friend Nate Evans from MMA TruFan. He is here to talk about his documentary series from MMA TruFan coming up. They're doing their second season. How are you, Nate?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well.
Awesome.
Do you want to go ahead and tell the fans about what you're doing? And it's very, very, if for all my fans especially, who are hardcore MMA fans, this is something they definitely want to listen to. So why don't you go ahead? I told a little bit about it, but you can give them all the details.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So TruFan is really a biographical series on legendary fighters. It's for like the name is, like the truest hardcore fans of martial arts. People who want to know more about the legends of the sport, about some newer fighters, not brand new, but people who have been around for a while. Season 1 was focused on some of the pioneering legends like Randy Couture, Ken Shamrock, Bas Rutten, Kevin Randleman, Dan Severn, Mark Coleman, Vanderlei Silva, Minotauro Nogueira. And what we do is we interview the fighters. We interview people that they know. We write a narrative on their biography of basically encapsulating their entire life. And at key moments, we have the people who were involved with them talk about these moments. Like we talked to Minotauro's trainers like Mario Sperry and Ricardo Laborio, and some past opponents like Josh Barnett and other people. And when we talk about certain fights, we talk to those people. We do all exclusive interviews. These are all stories straight from the firsthand sources. So that's a little bit different than maybe some other podcast series I've done in the past like this. We have one on George St. Pierre coming out hopefully around the end of May. And our next episodes, in no specific order, will be George, Royce Gracie, Anderson Silva, Dan Henderson, Renzo Gracie, Don Fry, Frank Shamrock. I might be missing someone, but we're going to be releasing those every other month from now until, for the next year or so. And we have other episodes we're working on now. Those ones I just talked about are pretty much done. We want to roll them out, spread it out a little bit more so we can keep making more content and having it more evenly distributed, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because before we released 8 of them in a row, like week after week, and then there's this big gap where we're off for like 6-8 months. And we don't want to have that kind of gap. We want to try to have consistency in releasing them. So we're going to do our best to release them every other month. We're pretty much done with most of them as far as recording and editing goes, but we want to try to have it more evenly distributed, if that makes sense. And we're hoping to have George done probably by the end of May, we're hoping.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so you guys have a back catalog of stuff that you've already done as well. So for those that are looking to see some more of their stuff, I think your first one is Kevin Randleman, if I'm not mistaken. So
that's correct.
Right off the bat, a legend in himself. And, although he passed away, you guys get the closest relatives of his you guys can get to talk to. And, just off that, then Bas Rutten, for example. So for those that are new to MMA, this is a good travel back in time to get to know these people that have pioneered the sport. And then on top of that, they're still fighters. So there's stuff that if you love about fighting now, you'll love about them back then. So, I'm excited for season 2. I'm excited for this GSP episode for sure. I'm going to give it a good listen.
Yeah. Thanks. I know that you're involved with TriStar. So,
right.
It's really cool to talk to someone who, has like inside knowledge because, I've talked to a lot of the people involved. I've talked to George, obviously,
right.
and some trainers. I talked to Sandro Fair last night, and but I've never been inside TriStar, so I don't, I don't know the ins and outs of it like that. I just know basically things about George's career, George as a person, George's training, George's generosity, and but he's a very interesting person. He's done a lot of very interesting things, and a lot of things that as much research as I did, and I spent months researching him, about his childhood, about his career, about who he is as a person. So many things from the interviews came out just from him that I didn't know, like how he gave almost all of his belts away,
Wow.
he only has, I think, one of his belts,
Hmm.
and he doesn't even know which belt it was. So it just kind of goes to show the kind of person he is.
Yeah.
And but he talks about stuff that's topical today. Like he talks about Khabib. He talks about you know his life today and what he's most proud of. So some of it is kind of trivial, such as like things from his childhood and stuff like that. So people who are very interested in him, learning the ins and outs, will get that. But also
Mhm.
people who just kind of want to hear about, um, things that are relevant in his life today. There's that as well. So we
Yeah.
try to focus on retired fighters
Right.
mostly, so we can take in the full story. Now, there's
Exactly.
some people who are kind of fighting a little bit still. Like we're doing one on Machida that we're working on now, and he's
Mhm.
still kind of active. But I
Right.
think he'd be the first to say that he's closer to the end than the beginning. And same with Frank Mir. We're looking to do one on him possibly. We talked to him a while ago, and we're not sure if if he's available right now, but
Right.
hopefully down the road. But Mir was really open when talking about Nogueira. He talked about the submission against Nogueira, about the arm break, how it disturbed him,
Yeah.
and talked about how he admired Nogueira, how Nogueira inspired him as a younger fighter, and how we got to know him when they're coaches on the show. So there are a lot of things that as much research as I could possibly do, I couldn't uncover most of the stuff that we have in the episodes because they come straight from the interviews.
Right.
So that's a little bit different than what maybe some other shows who cover historical stuff have done.
Yeah. Instead of having a narrator talk about it all, you have them
Right,
actually talk about it. So that's a
right,
different thing, and it's firsthand experience as well as, I mean, for example, with GSP, a guy that he goes back and, for those that don't know, he coaches on Monday and he's typically in on like Sunday at TriStar, and so he has gym talk with everybody. So as far as being, who's like who's number one right now in the world and talking about all that kind of stuff, he's in it because people ask him on a daily basis, like, what do you think, what do you think, because he's there for it. And as far as TriStar is concerned, it's you go there and it's a mystique hidden behind it because it breeds out these top contenders, and people from all over the world come to train there. So it has this like mystique, but it is like one of the most down to earth gyms. It's not even in the center city of Montreal. It's like in the outskirts, and it's, you walk in, it's just like a older gym that you've been to 100 times and has that fighter gym feel. I mean, the stuff's nice. Like they've got the cage room and a full size octagon and the ring, but you can just feel that it's not overcome with money and investment and all this kind of galore. It's, what it is. And I understand the mystique of it now. It's
yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly one of the best gyms in the world. I mean, like a lot of people
Mhm.
had said. I mean, I've heard Joe Rogan say that if there's one place that I would encourage someone to train at, it's TriStar.
Right.
And there are a lot of great gyms. Like I know that you've trained as some really great gyms,
Hmm.
and you know, uh, but when looking at some things with Saint Pierre, like he's a really normal guy, which is interesting for someone of his profile because he's obviously one of the biggest of all time. But
Oh
like
yeah.
his one of his training partners, Carl Massaro, one of his longtime training partners. Do you know Carl?
I don't think I do.
No, he's a super nice guy. I mean, I've
Yeah.
only talked to him on the phone, but
Right.
um, he said how George still goes into Henzo's and goes in the normal locker room and acts like a normal person, trains with regular people. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's really nice of him. Like it's
Hmm.
a very generous thing of him to do that. But when I talked to George about it, yes, George is a very nice person, but there's also strategy behind it because he said how you can learn from anybody. If you train with someone who's better at jujitsu than you work on your defense. If you train with someone who isn't as good as you work on your offense. You train with someone who is as good as you work on a couple different things. So, you can learn from anybody. And I find that to be, yes, it's nice and generous, but it's also strategic. There's
Yeah.
always something. There's always a good reason behind it. It's not just for the it's not just to be a good person, but he is a good person, obviously.
Right.
And basically everyone that I've talked to, like past opponents, like Carl Parisian and Pete Spratt, they all say how he's such a good person, and there are clips of them talking about that,
They
and
also
clips of
go
them.
to train with him as well. So
And they do, yeah.
Dan Hardy, for example, spent and went up into the TriStar, and I mean they were former opponents. It just shows that you see it a little bit now with who was it? Curtis Blades and Alistair Overeem,
Yeah.
for example, and Phil Davis and Alexander Gustafsson. You know, guys that they had this admiration for each other. They get together and then they make each other better, but you'll never see it out of certain fighters.
Yeah.
Because like Dom Cruz will never go to Team Alpha Male and be like, guys, this is what you guys need to work on when fighting me. So
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and that's totally understandable. I mean,
right,
you can't go making yourself vulnerable to your opponents. Whereas I
right,
think, with you know, Overeem and Blaze, it was over. With
hmm,
Hardy and St. Pierre,
right,
it was over. So
right,
like, might as well, bury the hatchet, even though there wasn't probably animosity to begin with. But these are also top fighters in the world.
hmm,
Like they're good people, but they still want to be the best. They still
right.
want to win. But
Because like Curtis Blades and Alistair Overeem, for example, they're both on the path to fight for the title. It's not like they're not in the same division.
that's true.
And I mean, you see it with some other fighters that you question. For example, I think it's the bantamweight division. They're riddled with people from American Top Team, and you go, oh, well, how are they all going to get the
What's going to
belt?
happen with that? Right. You're right. I mean, like, there's only one belt and you got a bunch of
Right.
fighters, right? Well, that's kind of like when I talked to Greg Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
how he recused himself from the Condit fight with St. Pierre
Oh yeah.
because he trained both of them, and he has
Mm-hmm.
great admiration for both of them. And, you know, I love St. Pierre. I love Condit too. I
Yeah.
mean, I've never talked to Carlos, but,
Right.
he's a super great guy from what I've heard and from interviews I've seen. And, I think Jackson did the right thing by walking away for that fight.
And he's in a position where, for example, in Condit's corner, I think that Six Guns Gibson is more his wingman for the
Yeah,
coaching, where
for sure.
it wasn't such an issue if Greg Jackson was like, it's a little bit too muddy for me to step in and pick a side. And then
Yeah,
obviously, GSP's got Faraz. So
right.
he's fortunate in the fact that he can go to different gyms, learn different things. And at the end of the day, he doesn't have to rely on the coaches there. He's got
Right.
home base.
Right. And just like you said, like, I don't think Jackson was the number one point man for either of those guys,
Right.
but he was probably, well enough involved to
Mm-hmm.
where, it could be thought that he's given trade secrets to somebody and just, didn't want to be involved in it, which
Yeah.
is probably the right thing on his part. And Greg Jackson's a super nice guy. When I talked to
Mm-hmm.
him on the phone, really good guy, very forthcoming with information, had
Yeah.
a lot of great stuff on George, and just an overall good guy, and we know, anyone who follows the sport knows that he's one of the best in the world at what he does.
He for us, um, I'm not thinking of anyone right now, but at least those two for right now, they're pioneers in MMA coaching. Mike Brown, he's one where they just have the overall tactician mindset,
Hmm.
and then you have lieutenants that work on other things,
Yeah,
and work on the specificity of like striking or grappling. So when you have something like that, it changes the game. And one of the situations was watching John Jones, for example, fighting against Dominic Reyes in this last fight. Dom comes out and says that line, he's never fought an athlete like me. And he's saying it as he's doing like the Peloton in the living room.
yeah,
And then John's got like a coaches meeting in Greg Jackson's office where, Gibson's all in the suit and tie and they're doing like, they're
yeah.
doing
The war
almost,
room.
yeah, exactly. But it's like it's set up like a NFL, coaches room. You're setting up schedules. You're doing everything. It's professional. It's a sport. And I think that's where John and Greg Jackson have really, and I think it comes with the help of having two brothers that are in the NFL and he can see what they do, but it takes the professional sport aspect of it and they took it to another level where it's not guys just in sweatsuits running outside going, I'm going to be the next champion. It's more than that. It's a international multi-million viewed person sport. It wants
Yeah,
to be contended with the NFL and everything. Well, here you go. That's how you take it to that next level.
right. And when I was going through and rewatching some of those old St. Pierre fights, I mean, I saw all of them when they happened,
Hmm.
10, 15 years ago. But when I was rewatching them, just to make sure that I had everything right, because so long ago, you can see some of the you know uh, conversations in the corners. And I don't want to say anything about any of his opponents because they all have great cornermen.
Right.
But you see them talking across the cage, and then you see you know Jackson and Faraz and Danaher talking to St. Pierre. It's just like another level, it
Hmm.
feels. Whereas like these are like scientific minds. These are like you know the smartest people in the world who happen to be interested in fighting.
Right.
And but there are a lot of great cornermen that from opponents you face. Like another person I talked to was Bob Cook, a
Hmm.
brilliant fighting mind, and he talked about something with George that was very interesting, and how George is different than many other fighters because George trains even when he doesn't have a fight coming up. He's
Hmm.
always training. It's just training is just his way of life. He's a
Yeah.
martial artist in the purest sense. He said how that's not really the case for a lot of professional fighters. They'll fight, they'll take time off, and they'll come back when it's time to train, and they'll train here and there, but they get more intense about it during fight camp. And I'm sure George gets more intense during his fight camp, but he doesn't really take that time off. I've
Right.
heard Faraz say in interviews how um, after a fight he'll say a guy will one of his guys will take about 2 weeks off, and then they're back at it. They're back in there working on stuff, and it's a constant process. It's a way of life. It's not just you know going in for 7 8 weeks, 2 or 3 times a year.
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
a,
I
it's an
mean,
ongoing thing.
with that, you realize that not all fighters, their passion isn't fighting. A lot of
Right.
fighters, their passion is something else. Gregor Gillespie loves fishing. There's certain
Right.
fighters that they enjoy other things, and then fighting is just what they're good at. Rumble Johnson has that one touch knockout power. Of
Yeah.
course, he's great at fighting. Like I would be
Right.
too, but doesn't mean it's something that you want to do. Even George doesn't like getting hit, and there's
Right.
even though you're a martial artist, there's certain people that just have a disdain for fighting, and then outside of it, they want to do something completely different. But if you have a passion for martial arts, it's almost like having a doctorate and then fighting people with associate's degrees, because
Yeah.
you're taking your knowledge to like the next level, and you're constantly learning and learning and learning, and you go against someone. And I think, talking to Sandro, that's how George found that fighting was going to be his thing. Was he was this already well-rounded martial artist, and then these guys that were like, I'm going to fight, come into the gym and spar him, and he probably sits them down with like side kicks,
Right.
and then he's like, oh, this is fighting, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can do this every day.
Right. And,
And
and it kind of goes back to, the difference between a fighter and a martial artist,
right.
whereas like some people just want to go in there and, scrap it up. Whereas
Hmm.
someone like George or, Anderson or Machida, these are people who are, martial artists in the truest sense.
Hmm.
They're training to train, to become better, to learn, as opposed to just being able to beat somebody up in a few weeks.
Right.
Whereas, some people are just, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong
No.
with, not being that type of, mixed martial artist. But it does kind of take that athlete to another level when their motivation is just to become better, as opposed to, getting that W, because the W comes with it.
Right.
The W is a byproduct of that mentality, of that, you know,
Hmm.
of that persistent, desire to train, just to
Yeah,
become better.
absolutely. And there's when it comes to the sport, the criticism with George is not all of his fights are exciting, but George finds a way to win. So you can say what you want, but he, at the moment, and having the fight IQ that he does, he can go in there. I mean, and sometimes he does pull up a finish with Michael Bisping. The right shot lands at the right time. But to say that he doesn't go in there and swing leather because he doesn't have the ability to
Right.
is ridiculous. He can do that. It's just that he realizes that legacy, and that's why we're talking about him. That's why you're doing documentaries about him, and you're not doing documentaries about the guy that's like swing leather till the day I die.
Right.
There's not a lot of guys that can keep that mentality and be undefeated and be, you know, considered the GOAT. So
Yeah. No, like I totally agree. And I mean, also something to consider is that, you know, we seem to take for granted that these are all championship fights. Like these are
Hmm.
the best fighters in the world that they're fighting.
Exactly.
You know,
Hmm.
these aren't, you know, second or third card on a UFC card, or
Hmm.
second, third fight in a UFC card. These are
Right.
the headlining fights. They're
Hmm.
all headlining fights. Same thing with Jones. You know, Jones has taken that criticism in
Hmm.
recent years
Absolutely.
for not finishing fights. There are people who say he lost that Reyes fight.
Hmm.
People say he lost the Santos fight.
Hmm.
There are people who say he lost his last two fights.
Yeah.
Personally, I think he won both those
Yeah.
fights, but that's just my opinion. Doesn't matter what my opinion is, really. You know, I mean, no one's asking, right?
Right.
But, you know, something about being a dominant world champion is figuring out your way to win. And if that means taking that decision,
Hmm.
then you're taking it. But something else is, I think that a lot of it comes down to, do they get the opportunity to have that opening? You know, are they presented with the opening to win?
Hmm.
Has Jones been presented with that up? You know, to me, there's a difference between not pulling the trigger and not
Hmm.
having the opportunity. Did
Right.
Jones have an opportunity to finish Reyes? I don't think so.
Hmm.
Did he have an opportunity to finish Santos? I don't think so either.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I can't hold that against Jones. It just means those guys are good. You know, those guys are really good. Did he have an opportunity to finish Smith? Maybe. Um, I think Smith was a decision as well. I don't think he finished Anthony Smith. I'm pretty sure that was a
No,
decision too.
but Anthony Smith also had the decision if he wanted to win that fight due to an illegal blow. So
Right.
you
Hats off to
sign,
him for that.
yeah, you sign contracts in the middle of combat that are unspoken to everyone in the audience. But John realizes that this guy, as much as he's gotten hurt, there's no reason to be like, well, I got him with an illegal shot, so now it's time to pour it on him.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. No, you know, and like, you know, there might have been a little bit of that too. You know,
right,
like I remember Brendan. I never get his name right. Brennan Fitzpatrick, the commentator.
oh
I
yeah,
think it's the name. Fitzgerald Fitzpatrick. I always get it wrong. I think it's Fitzpatrick.
hmm,
But he said how during one of those fights, maybe last year or so, that sometimes fighters have this like unwritten rule or unwritten agreement where, you know, I'm winning in the third round. I'm going to coast to this decision.
hmm,
You don't try to finish me. I don't try to finish you.
hmm.
And you know, we're just going to, you know, ride this out. And you know, I don't think that really happens at that level with you know, St. Pierre and Jones and those guys. I don't think they have that mentality at all.
Chael
But
said that Chael broke it into two fighters. He's like, you have people that finish fights, like the first round fighters, and then you have 3 round fighters. Ones that go in there, they put it on for 3 rounds, they get that decision. But the the sneaky trick about knockout punches or knockout shots or whatever is like you have to be in a position yourself to be knocked out. So it's
yeah,
not that you're not pulling the trigger. It's just that if I can hurt you with, good tight shots, and maybe I don't, knock you down clean with a big nice haymaker or something, or just a wild kick, and I can just do that for 3 rounds, awesome.
right,
Money in my pocket.
yeah,
And yeah, so you just got to pick the fights that favor you so heavily, where maybe you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu and they're a white belt, and you go, okay, I'm going to take them down. Fabrice Verdum versus Walt Harris style. Take your
right.
back. Ooh, choke. No, just kidding. Armbar, 30 seconds. Clean. Awesome. On to
Yeah,
the next.
yeah. You know, and I mean, like, you know, there aren't many people around who can do what Verdum does
Right.
on the ground. Obviously,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
I mean, he's really a, you know, like a virtuoso in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, the thing is with someone like George, he just seemed so far ahead of everybody else of his time.
Mm-hmm.
And as great as all his opponents were, you know, like people forget how good Josh Koscheck was. I mean, that
Yeah.
guy was a 4-time All-American wrestler in college,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a great striker. You know, I mean, not a, you know, not a top level, but you know, but he had, you know, hard shots. You know, he had dynamite in his
Yeah.
hands. And I mean, St. Pierre just, you know, ran right through him 2 times, you know, and people
Yeah.
forget, you know, how good that guy was, you know, regardless of what you think of him, you know, as far as being a pest or a heel, he played that part really well.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, he knocked out Hughes, he beat up a lot of people, and he was a great wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, St. Pierre broke his orbital in like the first round.
Yeah.
And
No, I
then,
was going to say he just jabbed him and broke
yeah,
his orbital. And for a guy that was, high level wrestling as he was, GSP didn't allow him to get his game plan off. And
No.
he just, I mean, to shut a guy down who, yeah, it would be nice to Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping, your opponent, after months and months or however long, weeks and weeks of trash talking in the house.
Yeah.
But to be able to go out there in front of millions of people and go, eat my left hand, and you have to go get surgery after. I always argued that as like one of the rulings when it comes to judging is like, who has the higher hospital bill at the end should be the loser. Because,
Well, like in that case, like in that case, St. Pierre would have lost that first fight to Penn.
right. But came
you know,
back. He comes
yeah,
back just like in every
he did.
fight.
He did, but I mean, like, I think St. Pierre won that first fight against
Yeah.
Penn. Like, I thought he deserved it, and that was
Yeah.
really one of the gutsiest performances of his career. People who
Absolutely.
have not seen that fight don't really understand how much trouble he was in the first round.
Mhm.
I mean, he broke his nose, beat him all up in the first like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I remember when that fight happened. We're watching it with my friends, and I was a big St. Pierre fan, and I love Penn, and I love BJ Penn too. But I was a big St. Pierre fan. But I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way he's going to win this fight. Then he gutted it out, won the second and third rounds. I thought he won that fight for sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of people thought he lost. Because you go see him, you look at their faces during the decision. St. Pierre's going to the hospital, and like Penn said, he went to the bar afterward. Penn didn't look like he even had a scratch on him. But I mean, there aren't many fights, and Penn's taken quite a few shots himself.
Yeah.
There aren't many fights where Penn looks all beaten up. Like, I don't know if this guy just doesn't bruise or what it is, but when you go look at that second fight, Greg Jackson and Phil Nurse and some other guys said how that was really like a celebration for St. Pierre, because everything was clicking for him.
Right.
And he used a little bit from all of his coaches, a little bit from all the different strategies he pulled in. It was just a perfect convergence of all his training and all his ideas and all his strategies, and it just all came together for him in that second Penn fight. And if I were to put my finger on him at his best, it's hard to find somebody when they're at their best. Like, when you put your finger on that fight, on a fight where you say, this is Fedor at his best, this is whoever at their best, I would say that was probably St. Pierre at his best in that second Penn fight.
I'm trying to think of Fedor at his best. One would be Fedor at his best.
I don't know. I would probably say maybe the third Nogueira fight.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. It's hard to say with him. I mean, you could easily say the Crow Cop fight, too. But I really think 2004, I mean, is just so far ahead of everybody else, And I mean, Nogueira, people forget how good Nogueira was. I mean, if Fedor never existed, we probably have Nogueira on that short list of greatest all-time guys. It's just true. He was second. He was second fiddle to Fedor. I mean, Nogueira beat all of those guys except for Fedor. He beat everybody basically of his era except for Fedor. Yeah, he came back in the UFC. I don't think he was really himself. He took a lot of punishment and pride against Fedor, against Crow Cop, against Bob Sapp. I mean, the Bob Sapp fight was ridiculous.
Yeah, shame with those pride fighters is once the UFC took off, those guys were, from the damage they already took from pride, soccer kicks and knees to the head. And then on top of that, you have Mirko Crow Cop at every corner throwing his left leg cemetery, right leg hospital,
Sure.
So you go into the UFC and then you have people that are fairly new. And it's a shame that, because for me, I had to go back and watch Pride. So when I watched Pride, I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Why people get hype when you see Vanderlei in the cage, or when you see some of these fighters in the cage, you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, so when it comes to someone's best, it is hard to pick out that. I was gonna say for GSP, I feel like you were gonna say the second Penn fight.
I would say that'd be my guess, or maybe even the second Koscheck fight.
Yeah,
it's hard to say. Right around that time, whenever that was, maybe 2009, roughly. I don't know. I don't know the dates in front of me. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I would say right around that time, that 4 or 5 fight, area there when he fought Penn and Shields was another one. Shields, people forget how good Jake Shields was.
I was
That
going
guy
to say
won.
the Shields fight was going to be my pick because of
Yeah.
the level of grappling Jake Shields had, and then like the scrap pack mentality. You
Uh,
know,
uh,
it,
Amazing. I mean, Shields. I mean, in my opinion, Shields was the best of that group, in my
mm-hmm.
opinion. You know,
Yeah,
and all those great fighters. I mean, Melendez,
right,
Diaz brothers,
right. Well, that's what I mean. I think it's
David
like
Terrell.
why that defined me as like his best moment is because GSP stopped. I think the guy with the most, like if GSP legitimately wasn't there, I think Jake would have been welterweight champ.
The guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so
So
too.
I think while everyone else in that time, there was always someone else. Maybe you could, but I think Jake was so good that if it wasn't for GSP, just like if it wasn't for John Jones, DC would be all we would talk about. You'd be
Definitely.
everyone's hero, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and same thing. Like I said with a Fedor and Nogueira. You know, like if
mhm.
it wasn't for Fedor,
Yeah,
it'd be
exactly.
Nogueira. You know,
Yeah, that's
but Shields. You know, Shields took I talked to Shields twice. I talked to Shields about Henderson and St. Pierre. And Shields is a super good guy, really
mhm.
nice guy, very humble guy. But I I think he's underrated historically,
Yeah.
whereas he's underappreciated at least.
Mhm.
Where he took those two big right hands from Henderson, and he came back and won that fight. And he dominated Henderson. And
Mhm.
I love Dan Henderson. I know he's very well liked. I love the guy. I mean, one of my favorites of all time. But I mean, Shields was really incredible in that fight, and but he just couldn't get off against St. Pierre. He just
Yeah.
couldn't get it where he wanted. And
They shut him down. It's one
he
of
shut
those
him down.
things. Yeah.
He kept it standing up. He did not want to go to the ground with Shields. One of the only guys that he wouldn't go to the ground with at all. The second Koscheck fight, I think he really, the first fight he dominated Koscheck on the ground. Second fight he wanted to keep it standing and just beat him up.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's we say these things like they're so obvious, whatever, but we forget that we're talking about Saint Pierre, who is like really one of the best of all time. you know and
Whenever he would show things, my mind would go, he's showing things that he did in front of millions of people, and then on top of like thousands of hundreds or tens of thousands of people live on, on this guy's best day, that
yeah,
they spent all their life for this moment,
that
and he
moment.
did that multiple times and shut down multiple people's dreams, like in front of
Yeah.
millions of people. So it's like when I'm learning from him, I go, yeah, this probably works.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, in Saint Pierre says something really interesting in that, um, and this kind of gives you the mentality behind him, that it's not the best fighter who wins, it's the fighter who fights the best that night.
Yeah.
And and you could be, and it's not like, you're not fighting 10 times. If you fight best out of 10, or if you fight 10 times, you might not win most of those fights, but you only
Right.
fight once. It's
Mm-hmm.
that moment, that night, that fight. When the lights come on, and I think he said, like some people are good in the gym or they're bullies in the gym, but when the lights come on, are you going to do what you need to do?
Yeah.
and
Um,
and, he, and he's been very modest about saying how he is afraid before fights.
yeah.
He's scared of being humiliated in front of everyone he knows. And, excuse me, Greg Jackson said how he really admired that about George, his humility. And he knew that St. Pierre, he got nerves, or he got nervous. He had nerves that were stronger than most other people that he'd worked with. And he rose up to the occasion and he dominated these people, which, is just a testament to his character, a testament to who he is as a person. We can talk about all the wins and everything else, but there are things like that, those little subtle things about him that you find in TruFan that you may not find in other sources.
And I think that it also is a testament to he's a he's a warrior essentially. He's a fighter, right? He's the epitome of masculine energy, but yet
Yeah,
he is one of those people that are so willing to sit down and just be vulnerable. And he's so comfortable with himself that it's not Achilles, kind of legend. It's more the guy, the Book of Five Rings. It's more
yeah,
it's more philosophical than that. There's more to it than just he's a guy that fought in front of millions of people and is a cage fighter. And doing that, I think, opens up areas for other people to get into the sport. And that's a reason why he's a pioneer. It's a sport for the intellectual as well. It's not a sport for just people that want to see, in the words of John McCain, human cockfighting.
Yeah.
Right? You need people like that to come into the sport and go, guys, listen, there's more to it. Dominic Cruz fighting this weekend. I downloaded his footwork DVD as like
Brilliant.
first thing, and he breaks it down, and he's just like, and you go, oh, this is a guy once again that has a PhD in the sport. He talks about it, and you go, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I watched the video and I shared it to a bunch of my friends. It's him being a dick for 5 minutes or whatever. And at the very end, TJ's like, I want to stand up and be like a role model and not say those mean things. And Dom rolls his eyes. He goes, I'm sorry that we're fighting. And he's not doing very nice things to me in there. And I'm not doing very nice things to him in there. Sorry for my mean words. It's a guy that can step away from, oh, this is this like certain rhetoric that you have to put in front of people, like, I'm a professional athlete, so I have to be. They step away from that and they can look at the sport for what it is. They can be intellectual about it and it not have to be just another sport. And that's
Right.
why I'm a huge fan of this stuff. It's not just a guy in a face mask that says the same thing the other guy on the team said. It's people with personalities, and it's more than just brawn out there. There's brain.
Right. And like something about this show that I've really noticed is how some people are very different in real life than as they appear on TV. And the
Mm-hmm.
real example that stands out for me is Vanderlei Silva. And people forget, we talked before a little bit about, Silva and Pride. People forget how great he was in Pride.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've seen him do his wrist thing and him looking like, a savage killer. He really was that in Pride, but when you talk to him, of all the people that I've talked to, he is one of the nicest people who I've spoken with. And when you talk to people who know him, they all say the same thing. And he said how when he was a child, he was, as he said, fat, and he was bullied, and he was poor, and he didn't have the things he wanted to have, and how this fierce mentality was like his way of changing his life. And that it's not like a fake persona. It's not like he's, Kobe Covington, who by all accounts
Right.
seems like a very different person in real life than he is when he's trying to promote himself. But this was like a switch turning on, like an over the top when like Stallone turns his hat around, like
Mm-hmm.
he's just a different person. And but when we saw him in the UFC, a lot of people say, oh, well, he lost to this person, he lost to that person, he got beat up by Chuck. People seem to forget that he was undefeated for, I think, over 4 years and won over 20 fights in a row, facing the best guys in the world, beating Jackson twice, facing, beat Henderson, beat a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those guys. He lost to Henderson later on. But something that's worth noting is after the second Jackson fight, which was on Halloween 04, I just know this because I did the research, 6-8 months ago. But he fought Jackson on Halloween of 2004, where he had the legendary knockout. We put Jackson through the ropes. We've all seen the picture.
Mm-hmm.
But Jackson almost finished him in the first round.
Yeah.
That was a really, really good fight. And people forget how good of a fight it was because of the way it ended. But then 2 months later, he was supposed to fight Sakuraba on New Year's Eve 2004. And Sakuraba, as great as he is, no one expected him to knock out Vanderlei. So, after getting beat up by Jackson a bit, it was surprising to see him take a fight 2 months later. To me, in hindsight, it's just crazy.
Steep ADC.
Yeah,
No.
right. Exactly. Right, exactly.
You
And
fight Ngannou, you take a couple shots, and then your brain's like, all right, we need time. And then he's like, no
yeah,
time.
right. Exactly.
So
And but then they changed the opponent from Sakuraba to Mark Hunt.
mm-hmm.
So after the Jackson fight, he fights Hunt, and he loses a split decision. I think he won that. Bas Rutten and Couture were in the booth. They both thought Silva beat Hunt in that fight. But then after that, he got knocked out by Crow Cop. Not right after, but later that year.
Mhm.
in '05. He got knocked out by Crow Cop and then Henderson. So he took back-to-back brutal knockouts before that Liddell fight.
Right.
So it gives you an idea of where he was. He had a lot of miles on him. Something that we found out in our interviews on Silva was with Frank Trigg, who's a friend of Vandelay's. Frank
Mhm.
Trigg, the former fighter,
Mhm.
commentator, referee. Hardcore fans know who he is. Um, he said how he was in the locker room before Silva fought Henderson in Las Vegas at Pride 33, I think it was, and he said uh, how Silva was suffering brain trauma before that fight.
Oh,
This is
wow.
what he said.
Yeah.
He said how when he was warming up, Vanderlei was arguing with Ujamar Fedrigo, who's the head of Chute Box, saying, "You're not holding the pads right. Why are you doing it wrong?" And Trigg said, this is his interpretation, that that he was suffering brain trauma because when you're suffering trauma, that your brain isn't clicking right, your body doesn't click right. It doesn't work the way it should work.
Mhm.
So that's why he wasn't really functioning the way that he should function. Then he goes
Oh.
out there that night and gets brutally knocked out by Henderson,
Mm.
and you know he was probably never really the same after that. He was probably never really the same as a fighter, I should say, after that.
Yeah.
Then his next fight, guess what? That was the Chuck Liddell fight.
Yep.
So there you go. So people can make their own judgments on it, and Liddell's a great fighter. Liddell is amazing. We know that. You know, does that mean that Liddell is a historically better fighter than Vanderlei Silva because he won that
No.
fight? I
No.
personally don't think so.
Well,
I
then,
think
yeah, then you're judging because then like then that's taking Chuck and going, okay, well, he's only as good as his last fight,
yeah,
and
that's not
then
fair to him either, right?
that's
And
terribly unfair to
not
him.
terribly unfair, right? Ridiculously unfair, because I do think Chuck's historically better than
Right.
Tito for sure.
Yeah.
Of course,
I mean,
definitely.
the resume thing, right? A lot of people don't want to take the time to look at people's resume. In boxing, Holyfield, for example, his resume doesn't ever get looked at, but
No,
his resume should speak for what he's done,
very
right?
underappreciated.
Um, and the same thing, yeah, the same thing with a lot of these guys. They have these extensive resumes of people they fought. And another thing that, on top of the older fighters, that fighters and fans don't appreciate is the frequency that these fighters used to fight at in the past against the same people multiple times,
Yeah,
high level people all the time uh, at this pace. With that, most fighters can fight now, take a break, come back to fighting,
yeah,
and they've had 14 fights as a pro, possibly, maybe less.
right, right. And I mean, a lot of these guys fight twice a year. Back in
Hmm.
the day, they fought like every 2 months.
Hmm.
And I mean, like just look at the Silva fight. I mean, he fought Jackson and Halloween. He fought Hunt exactly 2 months later.
Yeah.
I mean, that is insane by today's standards. I
Hmm.
mean, nobody's doing that today. Yes, Donald Cerrone is doing it sometimes. I understand,
And not
but
really, because the medical commission comes in,
yeah,
the state commission comes in, mostly gives people 90-day.
and I think it's for that reason.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of the that's like part of the medical suspension
Right.
reason, because a lot of these guys fight because they want money. Like
Hmm.
a Tito said. Tito told me that everyone fights for money.
Hmm.
I don't totally agree with that, but everyone needs to get paid.
Hmm.
Something about these guys um, later in their careers, like Coleman and Randleman, Kevin Randleman especially. Like he lost like a lot of his final fights. I think he went like 3-8 in his last fights or something like that.
Hmm.
But a lot of these guys they're great. They were great when they weren't getting paid as much. And then
Right.
as the sport grew, they're getting paid more and more and more. And then they're basically just getting lured in with these big paychecks. And someone like Randleman, he had to maintain his lifestyle. He had to pay the bills. You get set in this standard of living that you have to maintain. Nobody wants to become poor when they're old. Nobody, could you imagine being like at the end of your career and having less than you had 5 years earlier? I mean, in no other profession does that really happen except for professional sports. So, some of these guys took fights they shouldn't have taken. BJ Penn, one of the great examples. He's getting lured in with this money, the money, the money. And I don't know Penn. I've never talked to him personally. I don't want to speak on his behalf. But I have a feeling that that's what's going on with him, is that he's getting offered too much money to turn him down. And yes, he wants to fight. He likes to fight. He wants to make it happen. Vanderlei Silva still wants to fight. I mean, you talked to me before about possibly coming back. And I hope he doesn't. Like, I don't want to see these guys get beaten up when they're 45, 50 years old. But, you know, if that's what they decide to do, then I understand. But part of it comes down to money for these guys. And
Did you hear who they're throwing Vitor to?
I saw that guy. I don't really know that guy. He looks like, you know, I showed my wife a picture of that guy. My wife thought that picture was Photoshopped. She thought it was fake. She thought the picture was fake. I'm like, I don't think it is. Like, this is like an official, you know, press release, you know? This isn't like just some meme, you know? But that guy looks like he's going to like kill like everybody in front of him, he looks like.
He has lost to, I think, to Aung Song Lee, who Henry Hoof guy, heavyweight champ over there. So, and I mean, Vitor, I think, works with Henry Hoof anyway. So if anything, they got a game plan for him. But still, just like they did dirty Sage Norcutt, and I don't know who's their management teams.
Yeah.
But to have unless Vitor is back on TRT, which I hope he's back on.
I know. Is that terrible? That, like, you know, I'm praying that he's using performance enhancing drugs.
Well,
I'm praying.
It's for him. It's a health thing. I think for him,
True. I agree with that.
I think he should be on something like, if you want to fight people that are younger than you, and you know, and you've also exerted all your testosterone as a young person fighting since you're 19 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean earlier than that, because he won the title at 19.
Right. Yeah.
So I think for a guy like that, you should be able to do that. That's why I'm a huge fan of Ryzen. You know, they should get more people, because they're just Pride now, and
they are.
The Japanese,
they're Pride light in a way. You know?
Yeah, they know how to deal with the older fighters. They know how to deal with it where they don't get just demolished in front of it. Like, one has legitimate contenders. Bellator has legitimate contenders. You need an organization where you do it for the fun. Like, why not? There are people out there that you say, not all fighters want to fight for money. There are people that are going to want to fight when they're older to fight, but they're not going to go in there and step in and fight a Khabib, because it does nothing for them besides shorten their life. So I think you need a place like a Ryzen or something that just, you give them the Vitor versus Vanderlei fight that you know you never got, or whatever, or something along those lines, where you just take those older fighters. You don't want to say like out to pasture, because it's not that, because I think they should be compensated on top of it. You know, you just get, you have a smaller roster, and they get paid more.
No, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And like, it's something I like with Pride is how they would have fights where, you know, they would have non-title fights where, you know, Vanderlei would have this really hard fight, whoever that would be. Super fights. And then they would give him, but also give him this like can to beat up on, which is great. Like, you know, like, I mean, this can wants to get in there and fight with the champion. It's a non-title fight. And, you know, Vanderlei had, you know, quite a few wins like that, where he'd go in there and just like massacre some popular Japanese guy. But like, that's fun to watch too. You know, you can't, UFC doesn't have fights like that, you know, like,
and nor should it, because if you want to be the NBA or the NFL of the sports, then go for it. One, I think they should cut their rosters in half. If you want to be that, if you want to be that high level, then you have only like top 10. That's it. That's all you need.
Right.
And then everyone else, there should be like a smaller level league that you build up in, just like college ball or whatever it may be.
Right.
Because not everyone needs to be in the top 20. Like, you don't need all that.
Well, I mean, like, there's only 20 spots, right? So I mean, you can't have them all there. I mean, something else about Pride is, you know, like the UFC is still growing, still trying to ascend to mainstream popularity in the US.
Right.
And, you know, they're a whole lot further along than even they were 5 years ago, but they're still not quite where they want to be.
Right.
Whereas Pride was there. Pride was on cable TV in Japan. They were
Mhm.
on front page newspapers. They're on the front page of the newspaper in Japan.
Right.
They were one of the biggest things in Japan. So they had more leeway, flexibility that the UFC has.
Okay. Gotcha.
Pride was able to put whatever they wanted out there. They could
Mhm.
take chances and bringing in Zulo or Giant Silva and have these freak show fights
Mhm.
because they sold, and people want to see these guys get beaten up. So what's wrong with that? People want to see Dos Caras Jr. wearing his mask, getting his head kicked off by Crow Cop.
Saw that the
It's
other day.
it's fun to these people. It's
Yeah.
fun, and I mean I enjoyed it. But the UFC doesn't work like that because the minute the UFC does that, now they're going way back to like freak
Yeah.
show fights. Back when you have like Gerard Godot versus Taylor Tooley in UFC one, where it's like these spectacles as opposed to sport. But
Bellator kind of does it, but you need
they definitely thread it a little bit, but
you need to go all in if you're gonna do it.
Pride was all in on it,
Yeah.
and people and newer fans today say, oh, they're all on steroids, they're all fighting these freak show fights. Who cares?
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
these
okay.
guys, I mean, these guys are great fighters, and I personally dismiss the notion that they're all on steroids. I don't believe that was the case. I believe that there were some
Hmm.
substance abuse. They all say that they're all fixed fights. That's not true. Like, do you mean to tell me that Yuki Kondo agreed to getting his face stomped in by Vanderlei Silva the way he did? Do you mean to tell me that half of these things they agreed to this stuff? There's
Yeah.
no way that they agreed to that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, were there some fixed fights? I'm sure there were. Coleman talked about the negotiations for the Takada fight. One of
Mhm.
the only times he's ever talked to about it was with us. And
Oh
in
wow.
his episode, he talks about the negotiations. He talks about what they talked about before that fight. And people who know the sport know that that's really one of
Yeah.
the main stories about fixed fights in Pride
Mhm.
was Coleman losing to Takada. That is fixed. It was fake. It was all made up. Coleman got paid to take a dive. That's the narrative around that. But Coleman sets the story straight in that. And, you know, he says exactly what they talked about, what he talked about, and what happened. So, but something with Pride is they had that flexibility where they could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
They're selling out 100,000 seat stadiums.
Right.
The UFC, people don't understand how much bigger Pride was then than UFC still is today. As big as UFC is today, pay-per-view numbers are fantastic. Still not as big as Pride, like not even close as far as a national scale.
Our as a sport nationally, we don't recognize martial arts the same way as other
No,
countries do. So that's why one FC. If I was a young aspiring pro fighter, my goal would be get into one. I spoke to a lot of one fighters over when I was in Thailand because it's like right there as far as
yeah,
traveling for different fights. They can do it so easily, and they love it. They absolutely love it.
yeah,
They've got the water like for weight stuff on check. I mean, on to a science, so it's not hard. They feel compensated. They feel backed in a good way. One of one of the fighters shows the difference when he steps off the bus, like how the fans appreciate that. They feel like soccer stars. They don't feel like they walk into
barbarians.
or not, or they just like walk into the MGM Grand and they walk by
Yeah,
like 20 people and they don't care who they are.
yeah,
But when
yeah, yeah,
they walk off this bus and it's just like and it's more they like him not because he said that one thing that one time.
yeah.
They like him because of what they do in there, because of their abilities and their skills, rather than uh Connor said, "Who the fuck is that guy?" to that one fighter that one
Right.
time. He's hilarious. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
more than that.
Where they're more of like a pop, more of like a pop icon here in a way.
Right. And that's what Japan, I mean, Pride's famous for their silent arenas in Saitama because
Yeah.
they clap when things are good, but it's not like the let them bleed fan,
That guy.
yeah, that guy,
Isn't it funny that guy does that once? He is just immortalized. I mean, he is like
he's
the epitome of that like
the
idiotic fan. But and like I shouldn't say idiotic. That's really unfair. But
to,
that
to be fair,
the blood sport, the bloodthirsty fan.
I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we've had the Raleigh card and the Charlotte card. I didn't go to the Charlotte card because I was just like, I can pay the tickets to go sit in the nosebleeds, or I can just watch Cade side, like because I wanted to like watch it for the fights. I love watching the fights. The atmosphere that they can, take it or keep it. Been once, don't need,
Yeah.
don't need it multiple times. So, but what you do get, and for those cards specifically, is I always listen to the crowd, and it's like, guys, we can do better. Why?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Well, exactly. Like I went to Pride 32, which
Mm-hmm.
was the first Pride show in the U.S. It was
Right.
when Randleman fought Shogun, the
Mm-hmm.
Fedor Coleman fight. But Pride is known for silent crowds, like you
Mm-hmm.
said. And in the U.S., they were really trying. They were. And it was really quiet. And I mean, I had been to a few UFC shows. I went to 28 and 30 and 31, I think. Those were the ones back in like 2001.
Mm-hmm.
But to me personally, the cage is not as spectator friendly
No.
as a ring, because you just can't see it as well. I mean,
Mm-mm.
period. But with Pride, I got down. I was up in the nosebleeds, but security was very lax, and my buddy and I snuck down, got pretty close, and we were about maybe 100 rows back,
Mm-hmm.
and the crowd was really quiet. And for the Fedor fight, like I could hear Fedor hitting Coleman like with thuds, like
Yeah.
like I could hear it, and it just kind of makes you cringe, just like, oh, like you just kind of feel it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like when you see something on TV and you're like, oh, like it really was. Everyone could feel it. You can't hear that stuff in the UFC because you got people like, like the let them bleed guys.
Yeah.
But like I really wish that they would, but it
You
reminds me
also,
of going to a. Go ahead.
I mean, you also just won't ever get it like you will in real life because you're watching like a fight in real life. So
Yeah.
it's a fight. So when you watch it live, you're like, oh my God, are these guys going to be okay? Whereas when you
Well,
watch it on TV, you're just like, yeah, fuck them up. Cause you can
yeah.
just,
Well, like
whatever.
I also think, like I think the Japanese see it more as like martial arts
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
than like a scrap,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah.
whereas like in the US it's like, oh, they're fighting like, fuck that dude up.
Yeah.
Whereas like in Pride they're focused on, the martial art aspect
Yeah.
of it. So they're watching it like it's art in a way,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, thirsty for blood like you have in, the MGM Grand usually,
Well,
and that kind of dynamic.
it just speaks to their, what they fight on. Like they fight in a ring. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. As
it
opposed to a
helps the
cage.
audience. And then the fighters now have to worry about another cage. To me, like I think it separates it from other sports, from other combat sports. Got it. But what it does to me is it kind of dirties the product in a way where
Oh, for sure.
now takedowns can be stopped because your back gets put up against a bar wall. Like you're in a
Yeah.
bar and someone tries to take you down and you start hitting them with like they do in the movies. Where
Right.
in Pride, it's like you have to be very good at takedowns to be able to pick someone up, put them down, and not have them be like stop ropes. So and watching also the ring officials were way, 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 way more professional with like their fingers in the ropes. They're not with the UFC. It's like up to the ref and they're like, get your fingers out of the cage. And then they put them in
Yeah.
like 10 seconds later, but no one's like
Right.
sitting there like swatting it. Like they just they did it for like a martial arts sport, right? It was, it just so happened to be like where you watch those Kyokushin fights in the like in the gymnasiums and they kick each other in the head. It's like one of those, but just so happens to have a huge production team and millions of people are watching. Like
Right.
it was set that way rather than two guys literally in a cage. And I always thought this, you have to be, something here has to be turn something to step in a cage. They lock it. And then the rule is you can't leave until one of you two is unconscious or
Yeah.
like concedes,
Finished.
and you're locked in here.
Yeah.
Like there's no
Well,
need for them to do that. You can just be
right.
like, you guys are in here and you guys are fighting and you guys
Yeah.
are agreeing to, you guys one person in, one person out kind of
Well,
mentality.
that's just a different mentality, right?
Yeah.
And like I was talking to John McCarthy about Royce Gracie. We're talking about UFC 1 and
Mhm.
how, they're really going into the unknown then,
Hmm.
this really was sold like that, like two guys go in, one guy comes out,
Hmm.
and people didn't really know, like, is this really going to happen, like, is this for real? And John said how, and John didn't referee the first one. He started with UFC 2. Like, there was a different guy for the first one, but he
Right.
was involved with UFC 1 because he knew Royce and Horian, and he trained with Royce before UFC 1. But
Hmm.
but he said how backstage people were like pumping each other up, like, you the man, and hitting mitts and getting pumped up. And then the first fight was Gerard Gordeau versus Taylor Tooley, and Gordeau kicked him in the face and knocked his tooth out in the crowd. And John said how backstage it just went like dead silent. Like, people are like, oh, like, is this, like, this is for real? They all like puckered up, like, you know, like, fun and games are over. Like, you're going out there, and you're getting your face beaten in by somebody,
A
probably,
lot of people back there never sparred before, and they were like,
You're right.
"Oh God."
Yeah. Well, because a lot of these guys have, they show up with their black belt, and they're, and they're wearing their dojo shirt, and they see it as promotion, like, I'm here to promote my gym, my brand of fighting,
And no one's got a highlight reel made by some fan online and a
yeah,
fight
no,
library of stuff to watch. No, it's just guys that are like, "I've done this before," and they're like,
yeah,
"Okay, you're in. Let's do this." And he's like,
yeah,
"Okay."
and they go in there just get freaking slaughtered,
And then and then they get this small dude from Brazil, and they're like, "Oh, I got the right ticket. Oh, sweet.
Yeah, like, look at that
gonna
guy,
fuck this
they're
guy up."
like high fiving their buddy, and then they get
Yeah,
choked out in like 2 minutes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but
what ninja?
that's what happened though. If you go and look at Royce's fights, I mean, he beat almost all those guys in under 5 minutes. He had a couple long ones. He had, the Severn fight, the Shamrock fight. They went longer, but most of these guys he beat within like 2 minutes, which is just, ridiculous when you think about it.
I
But
I I was joking with my friend where MMA from then till now has become so universal, where a warrior from the Spartan times could probably get his ass kicked by some dude at the bar that's like a super big Conor McGregor fan and just like practices being Conor McGregor in his
yeah, he
garage.
goes home and
Just
like, yeah,
yeah,
like, then just goes in and like hits a heavy bag.
yeah. It,
Something I heard Dan Carlin say. He does a historical podcast. I'm a big fan of his. Um, that something that's interesting, I think, when it comes to even today's martial arts is the Spartans were thought to be the greatest warriors of the ancient world, right?
mhm,
We've all heard
right,
300, all the stories.
right.
But that's really only because the ancient world was mostly written by the Greeks. And the
Yeah,
Greeks
the
only
winners.
really knew themselves
Hmm.
and the Spartans.
Yeah,
So, like, they're the greatest of the ancient worlds of that little ancient world,
area. Yeah,
that little area. They didn't really know anybody else. They focus on their little, tiny piece of the world. And I think part of that kind of relates to martial arts today, where newer fans see this person. I'm not going to say any names because I respect all these guys, but this person is way better than that person.
hmm,
They don't really know that other person.
right.
Like, they know this person. They have that emotional attachment to this person. They don't know how good this guy was 15 years ago, other than seeing some highlight reels, which everyone looks good in a highlight reel. I mean,
Right. Right. Yeah.
everyone does, but they don't have a large enough barometer or large enough sample size to have a good barometer for it. They only have this little piece, whereas people who follow the sport for a long time have seen these guys and those guys. And I don't want to hear someone make the argument, oh, well, if they fought in today's game, they would get beat up. Everyone's so much better today. That's true. That's true that fighting is better today than it was. But I'm talking about man versus man. I'm not talking about era versus era. Like,
It's a
if you take this guy, if you take Vanderlei Silva in his prime,
yeah.
put him in today's technology, today's science, he would be a different fighter than he was then. Same
Hmm.
intensity, but more skills, but more developed. All these guys would be more developed. So we can't go off of, oh, well, people today are better than they were back then.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
is lazy noob casual talk, in my opinion. I
Because
think you
well,
have to look at it man versus man.
you're taking away from the grittiness that those guys had that's unattainable now. Like you can find some of those same guys, but they're anomalies when it comes to their grit, or they're considered, you know, mysterious. Like Tony, for example, like there's just no one with that same kind of grit as
No,
him. But you saw that kind of grit more often in, you know, the earlier UFCs. In Pride, you saw it all the time. Like it
for
wasn't
sure.
an uncommon trait to have, because like there wasn't, you couldn't develop enough skill and power to just overwhelm someone like you can now. You can get a former, you know, you can just get someone to have better skill, Damian Maya, and just take the back, choke him out, and you don't have to have the dynamic or that like hard nose. We don't really know anything, but we know this. We know like this much, and we're all learning together, and we just gotta, you know, grind it out together. So you get the hard nosed Mark Coleman's, you know, the inventor of ground and pound, a
Right.
guy that he invented ground and pound. So he, through doing it, had to figure out how to punch someone on the ground properly. And
Yeah.
so there was no like blueprint. They could just like learn the basics, get out of a 3-round fight, be unscathed, because the technique held. They knew what they had to do. And if they took an L, they take an L. But it's not the same as, you know, what it used to be,
Right.
where losses arguably were way more definitive to your career as far as like
Devastating.
impacting your health. Now people are pretty adept at being able to defend themselves,
Right.
and you have to have a certain proficiency, and most people know whether or not before they even become pro to at this point. Before pro is just pro, like you just fought. Did you fight for money? Yeah, I
Yeah.
fought for money. I didn't fight in
Right.
like a amateur league and then rolled up. No, you got money, so now I'm a pro.
Yeah.
And I think that grittiness, and that all comes from this grittiness. And going back to what you said about fighters from all over the world, I don't think fighting or like wrestling bears as a young thing is something that just happened this generation. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
for
For sure.
example, like Khabib, his family, that whole side of the world has a grittiness, has a
Yeah.
upbringing that, going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, you have Dustin Poirier, who spent countless months and hours working on becoming the best fighter in his age, to go against arguably the best lightweight we've ever seen in Khabib for some. And I mean, the road that Dustin traveled, the people he's beaten, lost to, built himself back up, the hours in the gym to get better and become a well-rounded fighter. And then for the and then go into unknown territory in Saudi Arabia to
Yeah.
fight this monster. And in the first 30 seconds, Khabib grabs his waist, and you can see it on his face go,
You know what? This is it.
this is it. There's something about growing up in a world like Khabib's that you're missing from fighters now, especially from the United States, that you're
Yeah.
missing, that you'll never be able to see unless their life ends up, they have to start wrestling bears. But
Right.
Khabib can step into that octagon every time, look at the guy and go, at least he's not a bear. I've got
Well, that
this.
kind of reminds me of, when we look at wars overseas, how,
Mm-hmm.
we have, I think the best military in the world, of
Mm-hmm.
course. I have nothing but the utmost admiration for our soldiers. My grandfather was a veteran. He was
Mm-hmm.
a, Purple Heart Silver Star, Purple Heart Bronze Star recipient in World War II. But when we put these guys into the Middle East wars, we're in their homeland in these third world situations.
Mm-hmm.
And you know I would want to be there. I don't know anybody who wants to be living there in that situation, war zone, you know IEDs all over the
Mm-hmm.
place. Whereas the people who live there, that's just their life.
No,
Like
they don't get a choice.
that's just their way of life. They're
Mm-hmm.
used to this. This is just another day.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like my nightmare is their everyday reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing. Whereas like a lot of Americans, you can't prepare for that. You
Mm-hmm.
can't prepare for being in that kind of situation day in and day out. And it's kind of the same thing like you're talking about, how fighters from these parts of the world who are from these impacted areas, this is their way of life. Like he grew up wrestling bears. These people grew up doing these unbelievable things that frankly Americans just don't do, because they don't have to. They're not exposed to these things. So it's just a different kind of mentality.
Yeah, I mean, CPS would be on your ass if your kid was outside in the back
Yeah.
wrestling a bear.
Can you imagine?
You just couldn't
You'd
do
be a
it.
viral sensation.
Yeah,
You'd be like Tiger King kind of thing, you know?
yeah.
I mean, it'd
You
be
just
ridiculous.
you just couldn't do it. And I think with and we can start heading towards the talk for this weekend, especially with the main event. And you want to talk about gritty. I mean, the main event is literally the two of those guys that,
The epitome of that is
yeah, the epitome, yeah,
today's fighting, they are the
yeah,
epitome of that gritty, nasty
hmm
form of fighting, you know, the cut you up, walk you down kind of fighting.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I love listening to Inside the Octagon with Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy is my, like, as far as like
One of my
breaking
favorites.
things down. I'm always a huge fan. Let's see if I can go ahead and share this. All right. Can you see?
I can see, yeah.
All right, cool. I just bring up the card so that way we can.
Here we go.
So yeah, as far as listening to him, the difference between their grittiness that I didn't even realize was how they behave when it's called upon them to become that gritty fighter. Like, for example, in Justin Gaethje, got hit with that right hand by left hand by Michael Johnson. Tony Ferguson, when Showtime dropped him, Justin Gaethje likes to do a chicken dance. Like he ends up having to shell up, recover, and doesn't. I'm not saying he doesn't pose threat because that right hand is full of power. Tony, on the other hand, enters weird zone, whereas Anthony Pettis almost hits when Anthony Pettis hits him, he also cuts him with the elbow, and then he attacks a leg. Like he enters El Kukui zone, and it's an offensive, answer to being hurt. I don't know if it's necessarily better. I don't know if it's necessarily worse. Being hurt isn't part of the game plan. So, I mean, unless you're Tony Ferguson, you can't really teach a seminar on it. So I think in a situation where Justin Gaethje is one of those guys where he might catch Tony, I think if either of those guys catch each other, I don't think it's a guaranteed sudden victory for Justin, right? Because then he has, yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, like, this is the fight. I mean, everyone wants to see Tony versus Khabib, obviously, but
right.
I mean, if you're gonna get a second fight, this would be the fight, obviously. Mm-hmm. I mean, how can't you love either of these guys? I mean, Gaethje is like almost like a modern day Vanderlei Silva, where he's just in there for war. He's in there to scrap. He's in there to get nasty, make it ugly. And they have Tony, who's just like so unpredictable, so unorthodox. You can't prepare for a guy like him at all. So, right. I mean, how does this fight go? I mean, like you talked about Gaethje's power. Gaethje could flatline anybody in the world, I think, at 155. I mean, he could legitimately knock out anybody in the world.
Right. Not a lot of 55ers can do that.
No, exactly. Tony, I mean, Justin, maybe Connor. I think that's about it as far as one punch knockout. But personally, I just think Tony's too technical for him.
So for me, I think with Tony, he's a true welterweight. People forget that he won the Ultimate Fighter as a welterweight, and I noticed it in his his fight against Pettis. He's got huge hands. Like for a lightweight, he's enormous. Whereas Justin teeters on the maybe if he hired a nutritionist, he could probably go down to featherweight.
I think he could, yeah.
So it's one of those. And right here they say 5'9", 5'9". I don't think Tony's 5'9", but the reach advantage is crazy. It almost leads me to that Lando Venata fight where Justin, when he shells up, drops his level. He's going to be, in the words of Dan Hardy, he's going to be the shorter fighter because he shells up. He gets low. Tony, being longer and taller, he likes that idea of when Edson Barbosa came in on him and tried to take him down, got lower, he shot for the Darce. Justin's got amazing wrestling, but I don't know if the time on the ground is the same spent that Tony has.
No, I don't think so. I mean, Tony's one of the best ground fighters in the world. I mean, he trains with Eddie Bravo. I mean, Eddie Bravo is about as good as it gets.
Exactly.
I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I don't see how Justin can beat Tony other than knocking him out with his hands.
Yeah.
I think Tony hurts him in the stand-up game. I think Justin takes him down. I think Tony beats him with a cut off his back.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I think Tony beats Khabib as well.
Yeah.
Off his back with his elbows with the cut.
Hey, you want a fast, quick number of views on your channel? Put up a video about how Tony beats Khabib.
Right.
And watch
Seriously.
all those Russian bots come after you.
Oh, they will. Yeah. They will though. They'll get you.
You can
But
have.
I mean, I think Tony wins that fight.
Yeah.
I think Tony finishes.
I think so too.
I think Tony finishes it probably in the third round.
We just have no.
I'll say third round doctor stoppage.
Yeah, we just have no. I don't know how Khabib reacts when cut.
Yeah.
And I don't know either. I don't think Khabib knows how Khabib reacts when he gets cut.
Khabib has never really dealt with adversity in a fight.
Exactly.
In the UFC, at least. I mean, he's never gotten beaten up. He's never been losing. Mm-hmm. And when you look at someone like Jones was losing that Reyes fight. He was losing. He was. I mean, he's been losing fights in the past. He was losing that Gustafsson fight. Jones
had his arm hyperextended in the Vitor fight.
Found a way to win.
Yeah, there's multiple times where I think Khabib is one of those fighters. He may get injured outside of fighting, but when you go against a guy like Tony, like Justin said it, he's like, I hope Tony breaks my nose so I can get this thing fixed.
Yeah. That's just it.
Fighters have to prepare for Tony. Tony just has to go in there and fight. And I think that's what Justin's going to have trouble with. I mean, Khabib holds that same kind of moniker where you have to train for Khabib. Khabib doesn't have to train for anybody. He just has to be the best he is.
Yeah.
And I think I just had this thought this morning. We're going to look back at this time and realize how lucky we are as fans and to see the evolution of the lightweight division where it used to be BJ Penn, one of the first guys to do the 2-division world championship. Mm-hmm. And he was a lightweight fighter. Lightweight has always been historically the most talented division. We are living in a time where we have technically 2 champions. Now, they've never fought each other to declare who's the real champion, but in almost 2 separate timelines, we've got one guy defending one championship and is undefeated, and we got a guy defending the other championship on the other hand, and he's undefeated.
Right.
I don't know if their paths will ever cross, but we're living in a time where we have technically 2 champions, and they're the opposites of each other in all ways. One is offense, standing and off his back. The other one's offense, on top and on the ground. It's just.
I mean, Khabib is definitely one of the greatest ground fighters we've ever seen. There's no question about that.
Right.
I mean, there's no question that he is the evolution of ground and pound. But like we've talked about with Tony and Gaethje, we've seen both of these guys face adversity before. We've seen both of these guys get put back on their heels. And the other side of that is, that's not Khabib's fault that he's never been on the wrong end of it. I mean, that's because he's a great fighter. So
exactly.
There is that argument is real. That's a legitimate point.
Mm-hmm.
But how does Khabib react when he's losing, when he's cut and he's bleeding and he's getting beaten up and it's all falling apart? How is he going to react? I don't know. I mean, and it's totally unfair to say that he's going to fold. I don't know.
No, it's not that. It's just
that's not fair to say about him because he's too good. He deserves more respect than that.
It's not the folding thing. It's not the worry if he's going to continue fighting. It's just more.
Does he make a mistake?
Right. Does his mentality, like, for example, Kane, Verdum, he just wasn't prepared and he made a mistake. I mean, it was third round. It wasn't like the fight was, he had a really good first round. Second round, Verdum adjusted and then Kane started to level off because of fighting in Mexico City. And then third round, he came up against some adversity, still was fighting. He just made a mistake that you just can't against Verdum. And so it's the same thing with
make mistakes with Verdum.
Same thing with Khabib Tony in that situation. Gets cut, maybe puts his head in a position that you can't with Tony Ferguson, i.e. Barbosa gets cut makes this
Right.
choke sink in easier.
Well,
So
I could see Tony winning the first fight. I mean, I think Eddie Bravo has he sees something in Khabib's game that he can exploit. Like they have a card up their sleeve, and I think the same thing with St. Pierre. I think Faraz and Danaher see something that they can exploit in Khabib. That's why they want that fight so badly.
I think for
And
Danaher, it's the leg lock aspect, which is weird because Sambo is really good with leg. But I think it's just the thing with Khabib is he's very forward pressure. So with Eddie, he sees the success that Tony had with Kevin Lee, and
right,
that's a very heavy forward pressure on top style. Where okay, that's fine, you can come into the guard, but you're going to eat all the elbows and everything. And
yeah,
then I think GSP's big enough to stop Khabib's takedowns in a way
I
where,
think so too.
yeah, it's not going to just be as easy as all the lightweights he's been, doing all that stuff. I think it's going to be easier to exhaust him out.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. And like I do think um, Tony wins the first one, but I could see Khabib making the adjustment and coming back and winning the next two,
Yeah.
having it be like a trilogy like that.
Yeah.
My co-creator Rich Donahue, who I do TruFan with, he's the first one who said that to me.
Yeah.
Whereas like I think Tony can surprise Khabib, but
Right.
overall, like I do think Khabib's probably the overall better fighter. And I think in 3 fights, I think Khabib wins.
Like you
2 of the
said,
3.
with AKA, I mean, Bob Cook and Javier Mendez,
Javier,
they're
brilliant.
other brilliant minds of the sport. I mean, Bob Cook's got the Bob Cook special.
About as good as it gets, those guys.
Yeah.
Super cool guy too. Bob Cook's really good guy. Really nice guy.
He's an unheralded and that's another thing about Justin Gaethje. He's got these are there are coaches out there that people don't know of that work a lot of magic behind the scenes, and Bob Cook's one of them. You hear his name all the time, but he's never
Crazy Bob Cook, yeah.
Yeah, he's never out there. Like Javier more puts his face out for the gym. And then Trevor Whitman is another guy who
Trevor Whitman's very good.
Corner of Justin, who, you see Justin's, style of fighting, and then you go, wow, what coach would ever think that's good? But then you look at Rose and you go, her striking's amazing. Same guy.
It's Trevor Whitman, yeah.
There's
out of Colorado. He does a lot of work with a Bang Ludwig. He works a lot with a Bang Muay Thai and Bas.
Mm-hmm. And he's got that understanding of striking and MMA that it's an asset to have. And that's why, as far as this fight could go either way, having Trevor Whitman in your corner definitely is an asset, and it definitely helps, especially trying to figure out the craziness.
Yeah, he's really really an outstanding coach. He knows this stuff as well as anybody in the sport. But going on to who you have, Cejudo and Cruz.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised to see Cruz come back and take this fight. Like I want to see him do well.
His last fight, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Win or loss.
35 shows he's 35. Yeah. I gotta believe if he wins, he wants to defend it once. Like I think he wants to beat Garbrandt. Like I think he wants to just settle that with him. Even though Garbrandt's not next in line, it'd be Jan or Sterling, and I think both Jan and Sterling beat both of these guys. Well, I think Jan beats both of these guys. I think Sterling, Jan's a freaking beast, isn't he? Man.
No one wants anything from Jan.
Nobody wants to fight that guy.
No one
Nobody.
wants Jan.
I gotta give it to Faber though. Faber got in there with him. Faber, he's a warrior, and the UFC wanted Faber to win so bad.
Jan
they wanted
walked
Faber.
him down.
They would have done anything. They would have done anything. Like I was surprised they didn't poison Jan.
Jan
they wanted Jan.
Down. Oh my god.
Oh, he did. I mean,
without throwing punches in the very first round for the first minute, just presence and being patient and you're like, oh fuck. Like
I love the California kid too. I love Faber. I love him.
Why you gotta do him dirty like that?
You gotta, he wanted it though. He he thought he was gonna beat Jan. And he thought he could beat Cejudo. So I mean, but
give him an Algerine. That should have been the
tell you, man, Sterling, you watch out for that guy.
Right. But at least you don't like. There's a little bit of respect, I think, going in there, whereas Peter Yan's got no respect for no one.
No,
You don't want
I
to.
mean, he's just a brutalizer. Like, I love Jan, I love Sterling, I love both those guys.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if I think Sterling beats Cejudo. I mean, like, I do. I mean, I guess I would like to see Cruz win this fight. I guess I would like to see Cruz win. I love Cruz. I've always liked Cruz. Cruz, I think, is very underappreciated. The guy is 22-2. I mean, you can make the argument that he's still the best bantamweight of all time. You can make that argument right now. I think he is historically. I don't think Cejudo's done enough to pass him. I don't think TJ's better. I don't think Garbrandt was better.
No,
Garbrandt beat him obviously, but
and there was another one in there, and he doesn't even get mentioned because once again, Dominic Cruz, like Barao gets like he doesn't.
Barao,
like Cruz has
Miguel Torres. You know, historically,
exactly.
you know, people don't even know who Miguel Torres is anymore.
Right, he was the very first small weight face like that, and then
the first star of that division. You know, and Faber. You know,
big star. Yeah, Faber.
And you know,
for me,
Cruz has. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say with the Henry Cejudo fight, I saw Henry against Moraes, but as far as going against the true bantamweight, like he's 5'3". Like not to take away from his skill or anything like that, and he looks like he's gotten bigger. I just don't see this fight going to a way where Henry's very good at adapting, especially with the Marlon fight, like to see him make that championships adapting, but that's to a forward pressure, offensive, hard throwing Muay Thai fighter, where in Cruz, you're going to adapt to years and years of advanced footwork development that he's created and perfected. And I just don't see how his shots are going to land. I feel like you had trouble with Demetrius Johnson, and that second Demetrius Johnson fight, I think DJ won.
Me too.
So then you're going to go from a guy who technically perfect in that way. And I know that MMA math doesn't work, but the struggle that DJ had with Cruz was a weight class issue. And I don't know if Henry, and this is the only way I see Henry winning, he goes in there and then just does what Cody couldn't do and just floors Cruz. Because I don't see it any other way. You're going to wrestle him. Cruz is amazing in scrambling. And Henry hasn't shown me to be like a like some world crazy ground and pound specialist. Like he hasn't shown, like he's got very good chain wrestling. I think that'll cause Cruz a little bit of trouble. The ability to maybe if he gets body lock and does the inside trip and all that. But the scrambling that Cruz has, it kind of negates all that. And then the footwork. I don't know how you're just going to overnight fly through that.
It's so hard to say. I mean, I'm rooting for Cruz. I want Cruz to win, and I have nothing against Cejudo. You know, I love seeing Cejudo beat up TJ. I loved it. I rooted for him. I wanted it to happen. You know, he saved that flyweight division. Yeah. You know, he really did. Mm-hmm. I do think Cejudo takes him down and beats him up in this fight. Like I just don't see how he can stop him. I mean, but you know, Cruz has the footwork. He has the scrambling. So hard to say, but I mean, if I had to pick one, if I had to pick who I think is going to win, I would have to say I think Cejudo wins it, and I think Jan comes in and takes him.
I see that. That's where I felt when Cejudo beat Marlon. I was like, I'm never going to bet against this guy again. And I thought after this,
I like Marlon too. He's a good fighter.
Yeah, I just thought, oh my God, Cejudo adapted so quickly. Like, he's just never going to be the betting favorite for me. So then I thought he was going to fight. Who was next in line at first? He was going to fight Jose. He was going to fight Jose. I was like, I'll bet on Cejudo all day after that.
I know. Yeah.
But then he was going to. Now he's fighting Cruz. I just think Cruz is so odd that it's very hard off your first try to do something unless it's like a decisive. You know, he does something where. Like and that means you're putting Cruz in a position we've never seen. And I know getting knocked down by Cody, but Cody never engaged in the ground. And I think that says something about Cody's ability to hold him down. And he was afraid that if he got entangled in that, he would have put himself in a wrestling position to get more, and that would have tired him out more. And I think
Yeah.
that's a testament to how good Dom is in that situation. So unless Cejudo holds him down, like you said, just lays hands on him, and then you see Dom helpless, like fair on him. But
Hard
it's
to see that
yeah,
happening too. It's hard,
exactly. It's
you
very
know.
hard to see. And seeing it in a decision, Dom is like the king of, I mean, decision Dom. Like,
Yeah, you know what we could see, like if Dom wins this fight, we could see Cruz versus Aldo, which would be pretty amazing too.
that would be the one thing we've never gotten. Like that would be that's the GSP of an Anderson Silva fight
Yeah,
that we
it,
never
it
got.
is. It
Yeah.
is. But now you have Nagano versus Rosenstrike.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm
my friends are all not about it because Derek Lewis and Ngannou fight, two heavy hitters. We're all
I'm a
worried
little
about.
on that. I'm a little bit there too. It's hard to say. To me, Rosenstrike to me in that Overeem fight just didn't do anything until the last 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So like, yes, he's great. He's what 10-0.
Yeah.
Sure. Hey, he's getting knocked out first round.
Yeah. You
He's
think?
getting flatlined.
So
I mean, like Nagano wants this championship fight. He
yeah.
wants Stipe to beat Cormier again. He wants that rematch with Stipe. I think he's in a flatline Rosenstrike first
I
or
think
second round.
this is Ngannou's perfect time
He
to
needs it.
go in there and double leg blast Rosenstrike and then just ground and pound him and then show that his wrestling's gotten way better. And then everyone goes, oh, he's more than just, the
He
guy.
could do that too. He
Yeah.
could do that.
I think we get that Ngannou. I think we get
That would be interesting. I would love
big
to see that.
Ngannou.
I saw this video of him like breaking boulders with
Mhm.
this, chisel. Did you see this video where he's
Yeah.
breaking these boulders? You see how
Oh, yeah.
freaking huge his arms are?
Yeah,
Like,
he picked up Shaq, no problem.
yeah, you see that? It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe him picking up Shaq. I couldn't believe he was doing when everyone was doing like the Instagram workouts, he was doing the slap push-ups where he was smacking his hands. He did like 20 of them in a row, like no problem, like boom, 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 and yeah,
Well,
there it is.
It's the just like with Matt Hughes, he had the farmer strength, right? And
Yeah,
Ngannou's got more than farmer strength. He's
he
got
does.
whatever the work that he was doing
Yeah,
back
raw
home.
power.
Yeah. So if he can translate to that into taking someone down, and we've seen him with submissions, like he
I mean, look at him right there.
yeah, I mean he's
a freaking monster.
Yeah.
Look at that guy.
That's a human
fight
being.
that guy?
It's a human being.
I mean, the guy was like a freaking freak of nature.
He like drinks milk like us. And it's the same thing with Yoel Romero when you see that dude and he was doing the two sledgehammer on the tire thing.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that guy needs sleep like me.
Yeah, he's crazy.
Those aren't humans. And then
I have Jeremy and Calvin.
So
this is the banger, I think. I think this is the fight of the night. This might be a fight. I mean, who knows? You can't say fight of the year, obviously, but I think this is fight of the night right here. This is
Calvin.
it.
I think this is if Calvin can get on, or this is the showdown of fast starter versus slow starter.
Yeah.
And who can make the adjustment in this fight, because Jeremy Stevens, like Jose Aldo got him with clean boxing to the body, and Calvin has unbelievably good boxing. I mean, if Jose Aldo can find the sweet spot, I think Calvin can, but Calvin takes 2 rounds to get started around. So it's up to,
it's hard to say,
yeah.
I mean, this is a banger, man. This is going to be a good one right here.
And then Jeremy is just, Jeremy's little Heathen Stevens. Like he'll knock you out from both sides. He's been in the sport for so long. If you want to talk about elusive, like his training partner is the most elusive in the game with Dom. Like I think, and that's the one thing with Dom and all these other bantamweights. It's like, I mean, you think you guys hit hard. My training partner on a daily basis,
right?
Sent RDA to another dimension.
Right. It's so hard to say this one. I mean, I'm going to go with Calvin in this one because
same.
I just think he has more ways to win. I think he is better at where they are better,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm good with Calvin on that one.
He's definitely the new crop for that featherweight.
Yeah.
division. I also enjoy the fact that his coach is Mark Delagrati, who is
Yeah, yeah.
one of the
Very, very good coach.
yeah.
This fight, I don't even know what to think about this fight.
I don't know, Jorgen de Castro. That I
mean,
I can only go off that one knockout that he had against what's his name, the Mark Hunt, Mark Hunt Jr.
Tuivasa.
No, it's
I don't think he fought Tuivasa, did he?
no, he fought. It's what was his name? Tafa.
Oh,
He's
Tafa, yeah.
Yeah. And Tafa ran in there and didn't set it up with the hands, and he just got floored. So, heavyweights are just one of those things. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, anybody can get knocked out by heavyweight. But, I don't even know. People can say what they want about Greg Hardy, but that guy might be a good fighter. You might need to watch out for that guy. Like my co-host Rich Downey, who hates that guy because of what he did in the NFL.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, have him come over for dinner here.
Right.
But, the guy's a good fighter. I shouldn't say he is. He might be a legitimate threat in that division. Like, don't be surprised if you see him headlining a card against a legitimately good fighter soon, because the guy's a former professional football player.
Yeah,
he has that freakish,
exactly. There you go.
freakish ability. He was a good player.
Yeah.
He's not just some scrub. He was a good player in the NFL.
He
might have the tools. He might.
He's got fundamentals and athleticism that most people don't have.
Yeah.
So just like the overall footwork, like you want to teach him boxing footwork, he'll pick up beginner boxing footwork in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like he
also,
yeah, go ahead.
I'll say he also has a really strong work ethic. Like, you don't become a professional defensive end. I'm pretty sure he's an end, a defensive end, by being having a normal work ethic. This guy is a freaking beast. He's not the most he's not the most decent person in the world here.
I did an episode of when John Jones was arrested recently. It's like John Jones is the best at beating people up, and that's what Greg Hardy's trying to be. He's trying to be the best at beating people up. He's not. Yeah, I'm not looking for him to be a role model. Like he beats people up for a job.
He's not trying to be a babysitter here. He beats people up. He's not. He's probably. Who knows? Everyone deserves redemption in their life.
Right. I'm
made
not
mistakes.
the voice of it though, so I'm not going to weigh in.
Right. I've never done what he's done.
Yeah.
But I'm not perfect. I deserve redemption in my life. So does he. So does everyone. So
right. I'm
here to watch. I might even root for him someday, but I'm not going to root for him quite yet. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm still on the Derek Lewis train of it. Like you see the pictures of what allegedly happened, and then you're like, yeah, man, he gets more of the Floyd nod to the fans of why they want to see him fight rather than
he does.
The people's champ Muhammad Ali why people want to watch him. So
yeah, for sure.
Then shut the haters up. He keeps doing it. So Volkov showed the disparity in like their level, but it wasn't crazy. It wasn't like it showed that he could stand in there. It wasn't like he was finished in 30 seconds.
Right.
But
so you have
this fight.
So you have Pettis and Cerrone. Yeah. This is going to headline your prelims, I think, right?
Yeah.
This is a good fight, both of these guys need to win. To be honest, I think both of them should retire.
No.
But they're not going to.
Or do this stuff. And this is what I appreciate.
Do this. Just, fight people who are older, fight people who are, like these guys should not go fighting young bucks because they're going to get massacred at this point, I think.
Anthony Pettis versus Jose Aldo. We never got that fight.
No.
Book it now.
Make it happen.
Yeah. It's just like there's
have him go down, have him meet it at lightweight, make it happen. It's fine.
Yeah.
Cerrone. Hey, I love Donald Cerrone. I want Donald Cerrone to retire because I don't want to see him get beat up. He wants to fight 3 times next week. Like, I don't know. I don't know what do you say to that?
He's the anomaly of a guy who just doesn't care about fighting, but like loves fighting. Where like you could ask him anything about who's in the top 10 of welterweight, he'd be like, I don't know, but he loves fighting. So it's it's one of those guys where he's different. Whereas Anthony Pettis fought an up and comer and Diego Ferreira, who's like the dark horse of that division. He
Sure.
didn't need to. He
No.
lost due to the technique of Diego. Diego Ferreira is just showing with Fortis MMA the evolution of MMA and seeing how just using the cage isn't a good defense to takedowns anymore.
Yeah.
Where Donald Cerrone, he fought Alexander Hernandez and said, "Sit down,
Great.
young buck."
I loved it.
Right.
And the Perry fight. Loved the Perry fight.
So it's, I think, where you see the inconsistencies with Anthony Pettis. He goes against, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's not even that much older of a fighter. He just fought when there were sponsorships, you know, so he kind of gets that older fighter vibe, and he knocked him out. So
we also had a really long kickboxing career before he became this. So, you know, so he has a lot of miles on him before that, you know.
But with this, Donald Cerrone, to me, he seems like he's got miles on him still. It's whenever he it's whenever he shows up, whenever the, you know, dad Donald shows up.
We saw that interview, right, where he talked about, you know, Cowboy didn't show up, Donald showed up against Conor.
Whereas Pettis, I think, just technically isn't that material anymore. I just think you're banking on one shot knockouts, and you're going to get technically beat by other people. And I think that's worth more retiring than a guy that Donald Cerrone built up his wrestling at welterweight, like racked in more knockout wins, submission wins. Like, I've seen an evolution in this game.
Yeah.
Even in his older weight. Whereas Anthony Pettis, like, I'm banking on you maybe knocking him out and then getting a submission if they're stunned. Like, that's a lot to bank on.
Yeah, I mean, Pettis won their first fight, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you know,
but you watched that fight?
To me, that's really irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, different energies.
Yeah. To me, that's really irrelevant at this point. I would say, like, I think Cerrone just has a little more grit. And I think Cerrone's going to win this fight. I could see it being a you know, a decision.
Yeah.
I just don't know how much these guys really have left in the tank. And you know, like, if they're going to fight each other and fight guys, have fights like this for the headline prelim cards, I think it's a good move for them, good move for the UFC, because these are guys that we know, guys that we want to see fight, guys that we enjoy. If not, then, you know, like, I want to just, you know, see them right off in the sunset. That's what I'm hoping for, you know, sooner than later, you know, before they go and get 3 knockouts in a row, you know, like, I don't want to see them go out like, you know, Liddell.
I think Donald's in a good space too, where he could retire, and I think he's got enough set up in his life where he'll be okay. I think Anthony Pettis, I think maybe he opened up his own gym. I don't know his as much, but yeah, it just depends on what they've got going on after. I hope that these guys, being around the sport long enough, they've got something that they can, you know, go to after this is all over. And
I mean, like, Cerrone's popular enough to where Cerrone could just go live off sponsorships. He could go advertise, you know, for Fight Gears or even Budweiser or something like that. You know, he loves his Budweiser. Whereas, like, Pettis may not have that popularity, but he's also really close to Duke Roufus. He could be like a top guy over at Rufus Sports. They're not going away anytime soon. Whereas, like, you know, Cowboy had that falling out with Winklejohn, so I don't see him going back to Jackson Wink to do anything.
Also, but I mean, Donald's, he's got a ranch. Like, he can just live, you know?
Right.
So that's why
I'm sure he has the money he needs.
Yeah. But this next fight is a matchup of just 2 submission specialists. One of them really dynamically changed their striking, but has been off for, they're the same age. That's crazy.
Yeah, they are. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Wow. Oleanek moves more like he's 42.
Yeah. I just think, I mean, Verdum's just too good here, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like, I saw, you know, we talked before about, you know, these lines. I think, you know, was it Verdum's like is like minus 300 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a little wider than it should be. I mean, if I were a betting man and they had Oleanek at plus 240, like, if I were a betting man, and I mean, I haven't bet on the sport in over 15 years. The last fight I bet on was Edwards over Mark Hominick. So that shows the last time I bet on a fight. That was probably 2002 or 2003.
Mm.
But for Doom, I think he's just too good here. I think he's one of the best ground fighters of all time.
Do we
And
see the return of the
Alexi's
flying
great.
sidekick?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I know he's 42. Maybe he pulls that back out. I
He
think
hasn't
he's
fought in a
still with
while.
pretty sure he's still with King's MMA. Pretty sure he's still with
Cordero.
Cordero, who's one of the best striking coaches in the world. You saw Cordero with Mike Tyson recently.
If you haven't seen the video of Cordero just tooling up people in the gym, sparring them, it is one of the
Dude,
coolest.
Cordero's no joke. There
One
were
of
those
the
old
coolest
videos of him back in Brazil back in the day. When I interviewed Cordero talking about Vanderlei, he was really good.
Yeah.
Cordero's a really, really good interview.
He put out a striking instructional. I'm about to grab it because I love his.
I would.
He's like sneaky Brazilian ninja.
He's very good.
He's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's essentially the brains behind Chute Box, the
Yeah.
brains behind Vanderlei and Shogun.
It's sneaky Muay Thai, which I love too, because it works very well with the smaller gloves. And I think that's a big you see it with Verdum. Verdum is the embodiment of that King's MMA, where it's just like knees from everywhere, elbows, kicks, flying shit, like whatever. It's just like everything and he doesn't have to worry because take him down, go for it.
Cordero told me that one of the things he loves most is getting someone who wrestles or does jiu-jitsu and teaches them from the ground up how to strike. Just he prefers that, just having it all be his own, ideas and stuff like that. And this goes to show, what he did with, Kelvin Gastelum, what he's done with Verdum. These guys are, they're still great fighters, even though
Brian Ortega should have gone there. Brian Ortega's looking great now, but you're talking about a guy who had the jiu-jitsu to go to a Rafael Cordero and just have him be like, listen, this is how you do strike. Watching Verdum strike and outstrike Travis Brown, a guy who, in heavyweight, everyone's got the power to knock you out, but the way he outclassed him striking twice, and to be able to avoid power striker like Travis Brown, and then not even have to focus on the jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Like that's something that Brian Ortega is like, oh man, well, if there's any guy that can take a guy like a jiu-jitsu fanatic and then turn him into a high-flying Muay Thai practitioner, it's that guy.
Right. And I'm interested to see what happens with Ortega. If he's going to fight Korean Zombie, what's going to happen with that, they got to fight. You got to make that happen, They want to fight, they got to fight. I want to see him fight. So you have Esparza and Watterson.
Yep. This to me, it's like, I'm surprised they even fought before. I'm surprised they haven't even fought yet.
Me too. It's so hard to say with this. What do you think?
I think I haven't really. I think Esparza might actually be on a winning streak. Yeah, she's on a surprising winning streak. Before
a surprising winning streak.
Yeah, well, because you don't really know much from her.
Yeah. Right.
From her. Yeah, she's on. Okay, so her last loss, and this is what I mean by it is Tatiana Suarez is who I'm more focused on in this division. Michelle Watterson, the Joanna fight was the definitive. Like, do you continue focusing on Michelle Watterson? Like, she would have been the next in line for the Weili fight. So then now they're both fighting up the ladder. It's just that Carla Esparza's on the winning streak and Michelle Watterson's looking to get that W back, or just like to get back in line. So to me, whoever wants it more. So I think maybe Carla, just through wrestling and being a little bit more of the grittier fighter in this situation and just forgetting about the Taekwondo and just plowing right through it and getting to the
It could happen. Yeah. Definitely could happen.
And
I'm
just
going to go with Watterson. I think Watterson's just technically better, I think. I think she's...
I think she could definitely just snap, like sidekick her way to a W.
I think so.
I just think that since Carla's coming off the 2 wins and she might see
she has a wind at her back for sure.
So
I mean, like, I think Watterson is just. I mean, I think she's just all around a better fighter. So
yeah,
we'll see what
yeah.
happens. And then you got
Hopefully,
Uriah Hall
yeah.
and Jacare.
Yep. I like Uriah in this one because I don't know if you saw that video slash article with him just living in the gym.
I didn't see that. No.
He went total like he put up blow up mattress, everything in the gym, hasn't left. And so I think I mean, the seriousness, he's also on a winning streak, I think, as well. And I think he's just, he's trying to get that to that. Yeah, two. So 2-fight winning streak. He's trying to, he's seeing, I think seeing Israel for him is, gives him hope where a
Yeah.
guy that with that kind of style can be the champion. And I think he goes, oh, well, if he can do it, I just got to get in that mindset because Uriah Hall, when he's in it, he's a scary dude.
He is. And I mean, like, Jacare is fantastic. What was Jacare's last fight? Was that his knockout over Weidman? Was that his last fight? I think it was, right?
It was the Blackwood. He
Oh,
went
the
up to light
Blackwood.
heavyweight and then he lost to Hermanson.
Okay, yeah. So okay, so
Yeah, it's been 2 fights since he's gotten a win.
so like, I mean, I do think Hall is going to win this fight. I didn't even know about the part about living in the gym, so that kind of just strengthens my my
Yeah.
position on that.
I just think I think when you see that, you see a guy who's got a vision for something. And I mean, Jacare, he's got the one punch knockout power equivalent on the ground. But the problem with jiu-jitsu is Mackenzie Dern learned it real quick. You have to get them there. If you don't
Right.
get them there, it's kind of a useless skill. So it's about, is Uriah Hall going to show up? Not let Jacare play into like brawling range and staying away and kicking him and just setting him up like Whitaker did.
Yeah. Then you got Luque and Price.
Just a rematch for the fans, I guess. I don't know why they're doing that fight, but
no, me either. I think a Price. What was Price the last fight? Was then he got beat up by Neal? Was that his last fight?
No, I think his last fight was the Vic one where Vic was like, "I'm gonna come up to welterweight," yeah, and then he gets up kicked, and then Neal.
Oh yes, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that Vic up kick. Oh yeah.
Yeah, being
I like Vic too. I like James Vic. That's hard to say.
James Vic is a tricky character for me because he got away a lot with being 7 feet tall almost. Yeah. And then now you get guys that like that. There's a certain level where that just doesn't work anymore. And I don't know. He gets clipped, and it's like a Struve effect almost. It's
and
hard.
And Luque was when he broke Perry's nose.
Yeah, no. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was his last fight. Stephen Wonderboy, he beat him up real bad.
Okay.
And then before that, Luque fought Perry,
but broke Perry's nose.
I
think Luque is a pretty steep favorite in this fight. I'm going to go with Luque for this one as well.
I think he won the first one too.
I think Luque is just better. And then Bryce Mitchell. I mean, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on Bryce Mitchell.
Yeah, they're both submission specialists.
They are. I like them both. I'm not as familiar with Rosa, but
so he's I mean, as far as how I tell how old a fighter is, I think he was in like UFC 2 video game too. So like he's been in he's been fighting.
I've seen him before. Like I just don't know him as well as Mitchell. I'm gonna go with Mitchell in this one. Yeah. I think he's really good.
I think just being young and
he's just relevant. A young buck,
and he likes it too.
And he got Span and Alvey.
Yeah,
I love Sam Alvey. I talked to Alvey for Dan Henderson. I talked to him quite a bit. Super nice guy, very humble, great stories. I don't know if he wins this fight though.
Yeah,
I just I think he's getting a little long in the tooth.
When I see numbers like 33 and 13, and then 17 and 5.
He's had almost 50 fights.
Yeah. The only person
those aren't good numbers, not record is whatever, but 46 fights.
That's a lot of fights. The only person that doesn't those numbers don't shock me, or that don't take away from them, is Gegard Mousasi. For some reason, he's been fighting since the Spanish flu. and like it doesn't show. But most fighters, when you see those numbers, you go, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Musasi's great. I mean, I love
yeah, he's
Musasi.
unbelievable. To the
I mean,
technique.
like I am rooting for Alvey, but my money would be on Span in that
Brian
fight.
Span, yeah, just
Yeah.
and just younger, hungrier. Sometimes just it is what the lines say it is, even though you
Yeah.
go, oh no, this guy, he can really. I've seen a lot of fights just go, oh wow, Vegas was right on this, even though I know this fighter. I thought I knew this fighter better than Vegas knows the fighter.
Yeah. With these guys creating these lines, I mean, I've watched this sport for 20 years as a hardcore fan. I cannot believe how close they are on
Yeah.
getting these lines right. I don't understand how that happens.
Yeah.
I don't understand how they do it, But
Yeah. All right, Nate. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. We
yeah,
got a lot to talk. I'm
really
everyone.
appreciate it.
This is gonna be a great interview for everybody. It's so
we should
much
do it
going
again
on.
sometime. Once we get a couple episodes out, we'll come back and talk. About one of these cards of the summer. Yeah, or even just talk about the cards. I mean, I'll talk about the fights, whatever.
I'll talk old fights. I'll talk any fights. I could do this all day. I love this. This is awesome.
Me too.
You want to go ahead and plug your stuff again, just so at the end of it, everyone can catch where you're at and what.
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter at MMA TruFan. Same with Instagram and Facebook, and we're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all the major apps, and trying to think what else we have going on. Gonna start doing a little YouTube video series here pretty soon, where I'm gonna try to do some green screens, try to get some, try to shorten it up a little bit with maybe some video clips and some interview clips with it along the way. I'm working on that right now, and
awesome.
So we're gonna have St. Pierre, Henderson, Hoyce, Anderson, Don Fry, Frank Shamrock, Renzo Gracie coming out here over the next year or so, every other month. But you can find Vanderlei Silva, Minotauro Nogueira, Couture, Bas Rutten, Ken Shamrock, Kevin Randleman. I don't want to repeat any.
Yeah, all your season one's all out. So
yeah, that's all out right now. And it's just like us telling the story with putting the clips in along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to get them a little more clip heavy, because as we listen to season one, we really like the dynamic of having the clips in there, and trying to get them more involved. And after people hear it, they like the clips as well, because you get to hear them talking about how they felt after the fight, as opposed to me saying how they felt, because it's just more impactful. Right. But thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And,
absolutely.
Big fan. It was good chatting. And
thanks, man.
We'll talk soon, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nate. If you guys want to catch this podcast and more, remember sunscrapnation.com for everything else, training videos, other stuff, shop, whatever. And then you can catch us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Spotify, sunscrapnation.com. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nate. And until next time, stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.